Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla with this week's story. The story has a strange name. It's called Angelic Hanging. Well, Jeff and Jenny were busy. They were playing cops and robbers, of all things, in the compound where they lived about 5 years before their father had moved their family to South America, to the country of Bolivia. Well, here he was a youth leader and he was the pastor for 8 churches. That's a lot. Well, as they were playing, Jenny hid underneath a big barrel while she waited for Jeff to find her. And then she heard the iron gates of the compound creak open. And then she heard her father's voice saying, "Kids, come here. I have a surprise for you. Come quick." So they all ran into the house. When they got there and everybody sat down, Mother and the kids looked at Dad expectantly. And Dad said, "My surprise is that I'm taking all of us to the youth camp for a whole month." The kids went, "For a month?" Well, Jenny, she jumped up. She started running around. "Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. What shall I do?" Mother said, "Why don't you start by going to your room and packing your suitcases?" And Dad said, "We leave first thing in the morning." Well, everybody packed as quick as they could. And before the sun was even up the next morning, Dad and Mom were putting the last of the stuff in their Jeep. Now, this happened some time ago, so their Jeep was kind of square, and it had 4 doors, and on the back of it, it had 2 doors that opened this way. Well, when they all got in the Jeep, they all sat down. But just like when my kids were tiny, there was no seatbelt laws. And most of the cars didn't even have seatbelts. So needless to say, this family didn't buckle up because they probably didn't even have seatbelts. Well, Bolivia, their highways, or they call them highways, were one lane just wide enough for a car to drive on. And if you got too close to the edges, your tires would go off the edge. So whoever was driving had to drive really carefully. Well, the road to the camp was no exception. Except this road was even worse. As you drove up that road, it was always on an incline going up, and their Jeep just fit on that road, and that was all. And on one side of them, the road went up, up, up. And on that one side, it was rock all the way up, like a giant rock wall, that if you looked up, it looked like it went right up into the sky. Well, the other side was the big problem. That side was a precipice that dropped off. Down, 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 until at the very bottom there was a big, raging river. But the road was so high up that river looked like a little tiny creek. Well, as I said, they'd been driving quite a while, and Jenny got tired of sitting there, so she got up and she walked to the back of the Jeep, between the suitcases and all the stuff. And she was standing there looking out the windows. Well, her mother saw her. "Jenny, you come sit down right now. I don't want you falling out those doors." Well, Jenny came and sat down, kind of reluctantly. "But," she said, and Mother said, "we could make the time go faster if we would sing. Why don't we sing some what we used to call camp songs?" So she started singing on top of Old Smoky. Well, they sang that at the top of their lungs while Dad was concentrating on the road because he didn't want to go off the edge. Well, Jenny, when she'd been up, when she had looked toward the edge of the road, she had seen crosses every so often along the road. And Mother had explained that those crosses stood for where people had accidentally drove off that precipice to their deaths. And the Bolivian government had put them up in hopes that people would be very careful. And Dad was just driving as careful as he could. Well, they got done with On Top of Old Smoky, and then Jeff, he started singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and Jenny started singing. Well, they all kept getting to the E-I-E-I-O's, and then they sang more and more and more till Jenny was tired of singing. So she got up and she went to the back of that Jeep again. Now, her mother had told her not to, but she did it again. And she got to the doors and she was looking out the windows. And I guess so, the road was really bumpy and it was really noisy. So she took both of her hands and she put them flat up against those windows. Well, she must have been leaning on those doors when all of a sudden one of them started to fly open. Well, she didn't have anything in front of her then, and she started to lose her balance, and she was gonna fall out, and she reached out, and she grabbed the handle on that door, and she hung on for dear life as that door swung out and around and over that precipice. She looked down. She was hanging in thin air. She could see that river down there, and she could see how far he was down there, and she was terrified. She was holding on so tight, her knuckles got white. She started to call, "Dad, Mom, help!" But with the bumps and the ruts in the road and the Jeep bumping up and down, they couldn't hear her. There she hung. What could she do? Then she started praying like she'd never prayed in her life. "Dear God, please help me to hang on. Help me to hang on. Send my guardian angel." She was still able to hang on. She couldn't believe it. Her hands were so sweaty because she was so scared. Do you know what it's like to try to hang on to something when your hands are wet? Finally, she used all the breath that she had, and she started to scream, "Mom, Dad, help!" And she was still holding on. Well, her mother, she turned around and she saw her daughter hanging on that door over that precipice. Oh, well, she didn't want to scare Dad and have him slam on the brakes and throw their daughter over the edge of that door. She tried to be calm and she said, "Lloyd, stop the car." He looked at her funny, but he stopped the car and he looked in the rear view mirror, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart. There hung his daughter over the precipice. He got out and he ran to the back of that Jeep. Now, the door was open as far as it would go, sticking out as far as it could go over the edge of that precipice, and the handle she was holding to was clear on that other side. Dad looked around. What was he gonna do? So he braced his feet and he hung over the edge of that precipice as far as he could, and with both hands he reached out and he grabbed the bottom of that door and he started to pull it around till he was able to get it over top of the road again, and he grabbed his daughter. She was crying and she was sobbing, and by this time her mother had come and her mother grabbed her. And Jenny said, "Oh, Mother, I'll never disobey again. Never. Oh, I promise I'll never disobey." Well, Mother, she held on so tight to her, and she said, "I'm just so glad you're safe." Oh, well, Jenny, as she grew, she never forgot that experience of hanging over the precipice. And she never forgot the feeling that she had after she had prayed, that her guardian angel was helping her to hold on. And I'm sure the reason they called the story the angelic hanging was because in my mind I can picture the angel holding over Jenny, holding on to the door as they were flying down the road. You know, you have a guardian angel that takes care of you too. Yes, you should obey. But if you get yourself in trouble, ask Jesus to help you, and he'll send your angel. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.